All right. Well, hello, friends, and welcome. My name is Doug Bouws, Vice President for Client Services with Money for Ministry, and your host for our webinar today, From Prospect to Planned Gift, the how and why of calculating donor impact. If you are like so many nonprofits, you have donors who hopefully have indicated to you their intention to leave you a legacy gift. And you probably have some folks that you think are in the pipeline. But how do you calculate the value of your pipeline, both those that have said they're in, you're in, and those who are thinking about it? It's really important if you're trying to communicate with your board, with your leadership about the importance of keeping donors like that engaged. And ultimately, then, how you can take those who are thinking about it to having done it. We're going to be talking about those questions and more today. Again, so glad to have you with us. A word about Money for Ministry. We have been serving faith-based and specifically Christian organizations from the evangelical, the Protestant mainline, and the Roman Catholic traditions since 2003. We also have a sister company, Canopy Resources, uses a very similar approach to serve charities from a wide range of sectors, colleges and universities, animal welfare, hospice organizations, affordable housing, and the like. We are a planned giving growth company, and our hope, our vision, our goal, we want to see every family have an up-to-date will, every family have a ministry in their will, and every ministry have a sustainable future. Since our founding, we've helped faith-based charities add well over $1 billion to their pipeline, and we're super excited about that. As folks continue to log on, I have just a few housekeeping details that will be helpful for you as we go. There's two buttons at the bottom of your screen that you want to be aware of. There's a Q&A box. We have set aside 15 to 20 minutes at the end of our time together to take your questions. So we're looking forward to that. That's where you submit questions. Use that Q&A box. I know every time, sometimes people will put them in the chat window, which is another button at the bottom of your screen you want to be aware of. You can do that, but I might not see it. So if you want the questions to be answered live, please use that Q&A box. Speaking of that chat window, it's always fun when we get some chatter going on, and I'm thinking about what it's like where I am today. I'm located in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the meme, the joke on social media has been that prior to Labor Day, we were all in our swimsuits, hanging out on the beach, paddling canoes, paddle boards, etc. And now, after Labor Day, we're drinking cider and eating donuts and wearing flannel shirts. So I think it's fair to say fall's here, or if it's not here quite yet where you are, it's coming soon. So here's my question for you in the chat window. What's your favorite fall tradition? I'm going to say one word, two if you must. Just start entering that in the chat window now. Your favorite fall tradition. It'll be fun to see what folks are writing in. Yes, the webinar is being recorded, so have no fear. If you registered, you automatically will receive an email as soon as that recording is available. You can share it with your team, with anyone else who was not able to join us live today. Oh, I love to see what's coming up here in the chat. Corn maze, those are fun. Yes, pies, less humidity, getting ready for winter. That's my kind of person. Get your snow gear out, get some skis ready, football. All right. This is fantastic. Again, thanks. It's good to see what you're most excited about. All right. I want to welcome our guest today, Brantley Boyett. Brantley is the president of Giving Docs, not just the president, but also the co-founder. And here he is. He claims he's a recovering attorney who practiced law for over a decade before starting Giving Docs. I'm going to invite him in just a minute to tell a little bit more about that story. So looking forward to hear that. Brantley received his JD, Juris Doctorate, and a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Economics from the University of Texas at Austin. And he also currently teaches law and entrepreneurship at Duke University School of Law. Brantley and I have had a little fun this week. He's a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin. I'm a graduate of the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I just say congratulations. You did well last weekend. We had our year last year, so I guess it's time. We'll just say that now. I was supposed to wear burnt orange today as to reflect that, but Brantley said he was going to send me a shirt and he didn't. So I guess I'm off the hook is what I'm thinking. So anyway, Brantley, Welcome. Thanks for joining us. And this invitation, tell us about yourself. What's your background and what's the story that led you to create Giving Docs?
Hello, Doug. Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for talking about Longhorns football. I thought we'd agreed that we wouldn't do that if I won, but it is nice to hear. So, yes, everyone, my name is Brantley. I currently serve as president. I'm one of the co-founders of Giving Docs. My favorite fall tradition is scary movies for Halloween, and also Texas Longhorn football, of course. And yeah, my background is, as Doug said, I was an attorney. I actually went to the University of Texas for my undergraduate degree and also for law school. So I lived in Austin for about 20 years. I practiced law there for about 11, and I founded Giving Docs in 2015 with another attorney in Austin, Texas. Just to tell you guys what Giving Docs is an online estate planning platform that is purpose-built to get people to do their estate planning today and include the organizations that they care most about in creating a legacy. So the tools that we have on the platform, of course, are wills, trusts, codicils, healthcare directives, financial powers of attorney, tools for beneficiary designation changes for life insurance and retirement accounts, stock giving, donor advised fund giving, crypto, qualified charitable distribution giving. So the way that came about back in 2015, I linked up with another attorney named Gavin Gillis, and we had an idea to create a platform that would provide estate planning for free for everyone, kind of democratize estate planning. And as we looked at that business model over the first couple of months, we saw a lot of ways to be like, get your free stuff online, and then somehow you would monetize it, right? Just get people on and then somehow monetize it. And where that led us was that we'd essentially be selling people's information or selling them life insurance. And I became disillusioned with that idea pretty quickly. And one day I got a letter from the University of Texas, and they were asking me to put them in my will. And that was sort of the genesis of Giving Docs. We kind of rebranded and looked at planned giving as a whole. And what we found was the system of getting in people's wills was somewhat antiquated. Planned gift officers have a sales cycle where they're 3 to 5 years essentially to get someone to commit to a planned gift. And once they've committed, they're sending them to an attorney. So we thought, what if we could bypass some of that and make this easier and get more people to do it, and also cut down the cost for gift officers to get people to make a gift commitment. And that's how we got started.
Fantastic. That's awesome. I, we want to get into some of the theory and the behaviors and the things you've learned while at Giving Docs. But before we do that, the Giving Docs logo, because it really struck me as capturing the essence of what both of our organizations are trying to do. Talk to us a little bit about that and what it means.
Well, yeah, like I said, when we were talking about, we renamed the company, we rebranded, we came up with a logo, and we wanted to look at like what the values of the company was and what our mission was, right? And so we really wanted to focus on the giving aspect, on creating a legacy, and that led us to a heart. And then, of course, the lines in it were about documenting that legacy. So that's how we came to the conclusion of creating that logo for this company. And I think it kind of mirrors some of the values and the mission that you guys are trying to achieve as well, if you'd like to talk about that.
So, yeah, we say a gift in the will is first and foremost an act of worship. And so for many of the ministries we serve, it's about tapping into the heart passions and the faith passions and values of the donors that are aligned with them. And I think what strikes me about that is it's what you're doing could be considered really technical. You're providing tools to help people get the job done. But the heart says to me exactly what we believe at Money for Ministry, that people don't include you in their will. They don't do planned giving because they're enamored by fancy terms and tax tips and techniques and all the tools, but that donors do it because the work of the ministries and the charities that they support inspire them to be better people. And the work aligns with their heart and their passion for ministry and philanthropy. I think it's the same reason that when you're promoting your annual fund, you don't talk about the intricacies of the donate button on your website, right? I mean, you're talking about what is the mission and the heart of what you do. So I love that alignment. It's great. So let's talk a little bit about what you've learned. You've done some really cool things at Giving Docs, including aligning yourself with the Center for Advanced Hindsight, which is a behavioral research lab at Duke University. So you must have had enough of Austin and said, I'm going to check out Duke, which does have me scratching my head at some level. But tell us about your relationship there and what you learned from it.
Sure, yeah. So in 2017, we were invited by Duke University and specifically the Center for Advanced Hindsight to come join the lab as kind of a 9-month program. And it was called the Startup Lab at the time. And essentially they would invite 3 companies a year to come and become fully immersed in the lab with the behavioral scientists and learn how to apply behavioral science to their platform and their business. And yeah, I'd lived in Austin for 20 years, and that was kind of the moment where I was like, okay, I think we have to take this really seriously. This is an amazing offer. And I looked into what the Center for Advanced Hindsight was. So it's run by a behavioral economist named Dan Ariely, who's also the James B. Duke Professor of Economics. And the mission of the Center for Advanced Hindsight is to make the world happier, healthier, and wealthier. And they do that by designing, testing, and implementing behavioral science interventions to help people make better decisions in regards to their health, financial wellness, and overall happiness. And all of that is a long-winded way of saying that they try to trick or nudge people into doing things that are very good for them. And so we were invited because they do believe that estate planning is good for people. Moreover, they think that legacy giving is very, very good for people. So we know that, on the average, when people leave money to a family member, it's gone in 18 months if it's not protected by legally from the person spending it. And that's because we learned this at the lab too. When people receive money from a family member that's died, they spend it faster because it reminds them of that person and they want to get rid of it. And found money is often spent poorly. So they also informed us, which I hadn't learned before, that when money goes to a church or a nonprofit, it has a 5 to 7x return on the GDP. So they truly believe that getting more people to create legacy gifts in their estate planning, as well as getting more people to do estate planning at all, is actually really good for these people. We know that people that have estate plans are happier people. We know that people that leave money to a charity in their estate plan are happier people, and they actually make more money than people that don't. And it's causal because they have a reason to create wealth that isn't themselves or their family members.
I was gonna say, I think that's worth saying again if people didn't hear it, because the first time I heard it, it really clobbered me over the head. Now, there's people that do good with the money that they've inherited, but you're saying for the most part, on average, it's gone in 18 months and it's spent poorly. But if it's given to charity, if it's given to philanthropic causes, 5 to 7x impact on the GDP. That's what you said.
Yeah, yeah, it's being redistributed in responsible ways, essentially.
Yeah. Some of the feedback we get when people register, it's how do I have this conversation? How do I talk to people about death and their money? It feels like I'm a money grabber. I don't know if it's not necessarily a strategy there, but it sure seems like, boy, if we can reframe our own position on it to think, wow, I'm going to help this money get even more traction in our world to help people be, would you say, happier, healthier, and wealthier. That's really good work.
Yeah, we really believe that the work that we're doing is good for everyone. So it's very good for the individual that's doing it. It's good for the nonprofit, and it's good for the world. So that's kind of, we had that idea before we got to the lab, but the scientists were able to help us kind of quantify it. And then, it was pretty cool. I went from being a lawyer on a Friday to being a behavioral scientist on a Monday. And it was kind of a crash course on what is behavioral economics or behavioral science, which are interchangeable terms. And so our company was essentially assigned a group of scientists to work with. And what they did was they kind of look at things through the lens of what is the friction. So they're identifying a key behavior, and a key behavior is, what is it that we want a human to do, and what can we do to influence them to do that? And one of the early things we learned was education is neat, but it's difficult to educate people to change their behaviors. So what are the other things that we can do that will help get them to do something? And so they took our premise, which was we wanted people, our key behavior was getting people to do their estate plan today and include the organizations that they care most about with a legacy gift, and really kind of broke down, what are all the frictions involved in getting someone to do that? And of course, one of the frictions is it's hard to get people to do wills. We know that, different studies say different things, but it's probably less than half the population that should have a will has one. And so we looked at, what is it about that exactly that makes that so hard? And, obviously making it free, making it online, making it really easy is helpful in reducing frictions, but, how can we go further? So we looked at, our platform a lot and how do we reduce the friction in our platform? One of the interesting things that came out of that was we got to do large scale studies and look at people who were hitting the different kind of pages in the flow in our platform, because in order to create an estate plan, you have to enter a lot of information, you have to make big decisions, right? And if you have too many decisions to make, that's called decision paralysis. You might just make no decision and quit. So how do we make it really frictionless and painless for people to create an estate plan? And that's difficult because some of the questions are really important. One of the most important is, who's your executor? And when we started getting in there and really looking at it, we found that by far the biggest drop off in the system was not people choosing which family members got gifts or which organizations got gifts, but it was that executor page where they would freeze and just drop off. And so we started trying to figure out why. Why is that? Why does looking at an executor trying to figure out who that is painful or scary? And so we interviewed a lot of people, and what we found out was that's the point in the flow of creating an estate plan when someone has to imagine themselves already having passed away. And so that person is dealing with that, and being an executor is not fun, and they have to go through their stuff, and it's scary, and they have trouble making that decision. We found a easy fix that mitigated a lot of that in just changing everything on that page to say personal representative. And it was something about the word executor, it's kind of conjures thoughts of death. Changing it to personal representative cleaned most of that up, but legally they're kind of interchangeable for the purposes of the flow. So it wasn't an issue for us to make that change. And that's just one of many things that we found when we started to peel apart our platform and try to figure out how to reduce friction and actually get people to the finish line, which is challenging for a number of reasons.
That really, it reminds me, you talk about that personal representative executor. We had done something, we didn't have the research behind it that you did looking at your platform, but we had a hunch, which is I think where most scientific inquiries begin. But we had a hunch that executor, when people go through the will process, and you talked about decision paralysis, one of the decisions they have to make is exactly that. Who's going to be my personal representative? Who's going to be the executor of my estate? Who's going to be the guardians of my children? And those are really hard questions. And I think it's fair to say that I have known for myself personally, you get there and you think to yourself, oh, I got to talk to somebody about this, which means I got to talk about my death, which means I got to talk to somebody else about my death. There's all kinds of reasons to put that off. So one, I think this is really interesting and cool what you're doing. Two, we took a shot at that in August with our National Make a Will Month. We put together 5 questions to ask before updating your will. And none of them had to do with property. They all had to do with, how do I want to be remembered? What kind of values do I want to pass on? What kind of stories do I want told about me? And then lastly, who people and what organizations align with those values. The thinking was maybe we can help people go through this process by asking a series of questions to make that particular decision easy or easier, we'll just say. So again, I love what you're doing. I think there's so much here about just trying to help people get over the hump that is so integral to what we do.
Well, I love that approach you took, Doug, and I want to talk about a little more about like some of the other things that we learned at the lab, and definitely getting people to think about the tough questions early on is a brilliant strategy, actually, because then they don't freeze in the moment. So I talked about the platform, right? So we looked at the friction in the platform. We also looked at friction in messaging, right? Because we have to get this in front of people, and we have to get them to make the decision to get onto the platform, right? So we had Dr. James came down to work with the scientists for a couple days, and that's Dr. Russell James, for those of you who aren't familiar. He's done a lot of amazing research on playing giving and what gets people to create playing gifts. And we built some studies. Most of them we can't release publicly because Duke is pretty serious about the information that they allow, that they pay for studies and allow out. But I can say kind of the methodologies that we took in those studies, and we looked at, what would basically like what gets people to click in terms of marketing. And we tested a number of approaches, one being influencers. So we know that influencers are super powerful, and they can be powerful for bad, right? Sometimes those things on the infomercials you don't really need, right? But people can absolutely sway you to buy things, right? And so we looked at like, who are the influencers that affect nonprofits, and does this really work to get people to do it? And we found that it works well with famous people, and even better for people that were associated with the nonprofit. So an influencer might be a pastor or a minister. Influencer might be a director of a program at a college, maybe the athletic director or the coach, the football coach, Doug. And that really works, getting people to do that. There's also social norms where you say that someone that looks like you is doing this. So the people that are most like you are doing this, and that can be an influencer to a certain type of audience if we're breaking it down by age ranges and demographics. So that's super interesting and very effective. We also looked at identifiable beneficiaries and identifiable victims. So an identifiable beneficiary, of course, is, if you make this legacy gift, then we can do scholarships for, this person received a scholarship because of this specific legacy gift. And the more specific you are, the more likely that someone is to donate. And then there's also identifiable victims, where it's like, we know that children are starving all around the world, and if you show images of that, then people are more likely to give to an organization knowing that that is the goal that they are trying to solve. And these are all very effective. We also tested a luck, or as I like to say, a gratitude activation, which is, you get someone to think about how fortunate they are in their life, and whether it's making them feel lucky or grateful to God for the things that they have. It's essentially the same. And if you can activate that and get someone to really think about that, then donations go up about 3x as compared to not activating those feelings. So, our time there was really fascinating. I think we learned a lot about how to reach audiences and how to, help people do this. And I think that that's really important work that the lab is doing to try to improve people's lives on a day-to-day basis. And they're really seeing things through a global lens.
I really love the gratitude activation. So often, and I see this in the faith-based, my particular tribe, denomination, brand of theology would say in its head that motivation for doing good ought to be gratitude to God for all the good things that he's done for you. And that's what we teach ourselves. That's what we want. But so much of faith experience in any tradition, you see this on the news, is motivated by guilt and fear. If you aren't good enough, God's not going to love you or reward you. Or if something bad happens to you, that means you probably did something wrong, or you might be angry at God because you thought you were doing a lot of good stuff. What I think you're saying to me, well, two things. One, I just love that at least in our heads, we know what it should be. We don't always live that way experientially. But I think what you're saying too is that we can use gratitude as a motivation, and it's equally effective as, say, fear or guilt-based motivation. And to me, that's super encouraging. That's what you took away from it. And I hope for all the folks on this call who are part of faith-based ministries that can influence the messaging that you do going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up that point because, fear is obviously a technique. If we're looking at a broad spectrum of techniques to get people to do something from a behavioral science lens, that's one. Fear and shame are, obvious things that we can get to do people to do stuff. We looked at it and tested it lightly because we never wanted to use it, but it confirmed our suspicions that it is not very effective for getting people to do their estate planning.
Don't tell them their kids are going to be messed up if you don't do it. Tell them instead all the good they can do,
Correct.
including
That's
it.
exactly right.
Yeah. Well, let's pivot here a little bit. A key piece of the work that you do at Giving Docs is helping charities understand the value of a hand raiser. Maybe just so we're all on the same page, what is a hand raiser and how do you define it?
So yeah, we define over here, and I think it's fair to say that this is a kind of a loosely defined term in the industry where everyone kind of knows what it is, but I think different organizations define it different ways. So we define a hand raiser as a person who has signified intent to leave a gift in their estate plan to an organization that they care about, but has not yet done so. So they haven't finalized the documentation and they've let the organization know that they're interested in doing it.
Okay. And I think we're both super interested in these types of people because of the opportunity, of course, that exists there. Can you say a little bit about some of the I think the value of a hand raiser, and yet you have a hand raiser calculator. Tell us a little bit about that. I know there's some math involved there. What are you seeing, and how does that calculator help us think about the value of these folks that are anywhere along the pipeline?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I was talking with one of my colleagues at a kind of parallel company, and we saw on our platform, and they saw through some of the work that they were doing, was that we were getting a lot of people to start to create a gift to an organization, but not finish for whatever reason. So we were identifying a lot of people that were interested in this, and they weren't finishing, and we were just kind of giving that over to the organizations we work with. And part of my business, your business, is getting results for organizations, and results generally throughout the history of Plain Giving have been documented gifts, right? So, what exactly are we getting? Because gift officers have to report up to CFOs, and they want to know, are we spending our money well? Are we actually getting plain gifts? And Plain Giving in general, it's difficult to quantify what you're going to get because these gifts are revocable. And, we wanted to know kind of what is the impact of what we're doing today. And so that means that taking a kind of a harder look at these hand raisers and what they meant to the organization and whether or not we could quantify a value of those hand raisers today so that the gift officers that we work with would have something to report up, essentially, because they're doing a lot of work. You're doing a lot of work. I'm doing a lot of work to identify these people. And we wanted to kind of try to figure out what that meant to the organization. And part of it was that we know that in general, Plan Giving is underfunded, and that gift officers and Plan Giving directors and development directors are always having to kind of make the case for human resources, for services like the ones I provide, like you provide. And so we wanted to be able to say, hey, look, we think this has value. Here's why this has value. And the organization should feel more comfortable kind of investing in things that bring more hand raisers to the table because they actually do have a value to the organization. So that was kind of the goal. And in starting this conversation, we did, probably, still ongoing 2.5 years later, but we did a lot of market research. So we went out and talked to people in the industry, asked them, about hand raisers. Do you value them? How do they fit into your pipeline? How do you report on them? And what we found was, a few larger organizations actually had really robust reporting systems for the hand raisers in their pipeline. And they were actually segmenting them, communicating with them differently, and also giving themselves credit for that. So it was like a key metric that they needed to report on because they understood that they were building the pipeline. Only a couple of them assigned a monetary value at the time, but they did it a little differently than we did. But we kind of posed the question like, can we assign a current day monetary value to this kind of future class of assets? And can we consider them what we consider all plan giving gifts, which is assets under management for the organization? So we use the term around here GUM for gifts under management. And gifts under management are an interesting asset class because you have booked gifts, which the organization knows about, and they're kind of counting on a certain percentage of these coming in. They know that there's going to be some attrition, and they know that some of these gifts can be revoked. And so we think about gifts under management and how the pipeline of hand raisers can fit into that. And what I did was I went back to the lab and recruited a couple of the scientists and said, hey, can you help me? I want to do like a mathematical equation to try to figure out what these people would be valued at if we were looking at valuing them today. And what they came back to me with was kind of a modified customer lifetime value equation, which is what businesses use to determine the value of customers over the course of their life. And they instead kind of reversed it and to say, okay, well, this is what the value of this person is to the organization today. So kind of the inputs that we put into that were, we looked at, we know that a certain percentage of hand raisers will convert to a planned gift on any given year. And the assumption that we started out with after talking to lots of organizations was that was about 3%. 3% of the people in your hand raiser pipeline roughly are going to convert to a planned gift every year if you're working the pipeline correctly. And some of those, part of the issue, some of those will be reported, some will be unreported. And that's one of the reasons why Giving Docs exists, is because we know currently most gifts are still unreported. And so anything we can do to kind of provide insights into where these gifts actually existing is very helpful in helping understand what that gifts under management pipeline really is. So we start out with that assumption of 3% there. Next thing we looked at is attrition. And we know that a certain number of the people who have raised their hands to leave a planned gift will change their mind about the organization. They might decide they want to be a member at a different church. They might, have cared more about Feeding America, but then their mom got cancer, and so now they're more interested in the Cancer Society. So it's not necessarily the fault of the organization, but sometimes the organization ignores people who have raised their hands, and then that's part of the attrition too. And of course, if we're not valuing these people, they're more likely to get ignored. So we looked at attrition and we said maybe 1% will fall off. Then we look at average gift size. So I think the assumption was that, it's roughly 40K, but this varies widely across the industry. And we looked at all different verticals, and, there's some hospitals that have an average gift that's well over 100K or more. And then there's some smaller orgs who have much smaller average plan gifts. But that's something that you can change in the calculator. And then another factor that we looked at was life expectancy. So how long are these people going to live? Will they, and how many years do they have to create this gift? And when you put all that in, you get what Janie just popped into the chat, which is the givingdocs.com/handraiser value. And that is a calculator that anyone on this call can get on and put in their organization's numbers. So I encourage you to do that and kind of look at that. And what it does is it spits out a number based on the factors that I just laid out above that says, okay, we think that each hand raiser that you add to your pipeline this year is worth exactly this much to the organization. And I think that's really interesting for internal conversations. Of course, it's not money that's coming in the door, but it gives you an idea of the value of the work that you're putting in and something to report up to CFOs. We are working on getting this to be a gift planning standard for the Association of Charitable Gift Planners. And I will say that this is not, it's always kind of going to be a work in progress. I think there are other inputs that could get put in here, and experts are always kind of lending a hand and helping us figure out exactly what this looks like moving forward. But I think it's a really useful tool and kind of saying, oh, okay, there's actually more value here in what I've done than just reporting the 10 closed gifts that I was able to achieve this year, because I've created a lot more value for the organization than we're actually getting credit for.
You think, question that's in the registration for this webinar, I don't know, 10 to 15 different people made some comment to the effect of, I can't get donors to fill out my gift intent form. I can't get donors to tell me the amount of their gift. I can't get donors to, fill out. What do you think this replaces those forms, or maybe not? What do you think of those forms in general? Are they of any value?
No, I think they're important forms. I think that's just one of the hurdles that gift planners face, is that people have traditional reasons to not do that, right? They're worried that the organization is going to, once they tell them that they're in there, they're going to come after them for major gifts, other types of giving. They think they're going to put on some list where they're going to get harassed. That's usually not the case. And I think organizations have gotten more cognizant about that. But I think also, that's part of, every organization has different reporting and needs in order to be able to book a gift, right? So you may need that intention form signed in order for you to get credit for doing your job. And that's incredibly frustrating. So I would look at, the ways that we're communicating with donors, and maybe the layout of the form, like how can we make this a little less frictional for the donor to get us to where we need to go. And maybe this form isn't the right way to do it. Maybe there's another way, but that, speaks to reporting needs at the organization, which is different everywhere. So I think, it's something I'd be happy to chat with anyone about.
It's a fascinating conversation. I wonder personally, I know a lot of colleges and universities, you tend to see more of that in terms of the need or the necessity of a form. Some of the smaller organizations that we work with, and because we're often in our work working with mid to mass level donors, there's much more hesitancy on the part of the donor to want to fill one of those forms out. Like, what is this? You talked about them, will they come after me for more money? I think it's like, I don't even have that much money. Like, you're in my will, you're going to get what's left over. Like, that's good enough. I was curious about your perspective on that, and it's super helpful. I think those forms they're often ministry or charity centric driven. They're geared for the charity to be able to plan on some things. I'm not so sure that they are donor centric and that they fill the donor's needs. So I'm with you there. I think they often need to be rethought. My personal recommendation to gift officers is, if somebody tells you they're in their will, treat them like they are, and that treatment will over time confirm or deny the gift itself, just by virtue of their behaviors.
I agree, Doug. What we found is those forms aren't really helpful generally, and that they're a bit antiquated, right? I think we should believe our donors when they talk to us, and that questioning their intention isn't super helpful for getting gifts in the door.
All right. Just on that, a little note from this has really been inspiring to us too. Those who are familiar with the work that we do, we often are finding donors that will raise their hand and say that they would consider, or they intend to include. They're not even in, say, a platform like Giving Docs yet. And we've just begun to start to think about what it would look like to monetize or to put a value on that. So something to look forward to in the future as we think about how that can influence the work that many of the folks on this call are already doing. So we believe that these hand raisers have value. Of course, we believe the folks that have already done it have value. Let's talk about this some more. What are some proven methods to move people from, hey, I'm curious, I'm aware, I'm thinking about it, to I'm considering it, to I've done it?
Well, yeah, I mean, from our perspective, that's kind of, what we do. We make it easy for people to complete their estate plan and also to report back to the nonprofit. So it's frictionless in that respect, that they've already opted to share their information, so they don't need to fill out a form. That's all baked into the process, right? And that's kind of what we do over here to make it easier for people to complete their gift and then report it back to the organization. We also, we don't do what you do, right? So there's a lot of ways that plan giving marketing firms can really get people to a place where they're ready for us, or a place where they're ready to go to their attorney. And I'd kick that one back to you. Like, what are the things that you guys are doing over there to get people, first of all, to raise their hand, secondly, to get them to the finish line, and then what are you seeing that's working really well for you guys this year?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks. Let me take a shot at that. So we've already talked about this idea of inspiration before information. We want people to be inspired rather than be fed a whole lot of information. But the next thing I think is just as important, if not more. We often say in our work with the ministries we serve, serving over selling. Selling being this idea, I got to close the gift today. I need an answer. I got to get a report in. Serving is this idea that legacy gifts are motivated by depth of connection. So we're going to serve you, we're going to serve you, we're going to serve you, but they're triggered by life events. And life events you can't control. So if I'm motivated by my depth of the connection, that means that I am receiving impact reports, that I am being approached by the ministry to partner with the organization in a pretty unique way. Maybe it's a survey where they get my ask for my input. Maybe it's just coming to listen to me, where my passions are, where my heart is. Maybe it's, again, leaning into that inspiration before information, but just continuing to share what's at the heart of their heart and what's at the heart of what you do, so that when that life event happens, could be a marriage, a birth of a child or a grandchild, you're going in for surgery, you're traveling, that suddenly, because that's what triggers the gift in the will, that's what triggers the update. That's when they finally say, I got to get to Giving Docs, I got to meet with my attorney. And an example of that I thought was super helpful, I'm going to just pull up something to share here. I think this was really illustrative of how that works. Now, you can have conversations with your donors in a whole variety of ways. You can have personal contact conversations. You can have phone calls. You can do surveys. Here's an example of some surveys that we did with a particular ministry. I've taken out these are real people with real phone numbers, real names. These are their ages. What we do in our work is we like to say, we use colors. So orange means you're just thinking about legacy planning, giving, but you haven't really moved very far along on it. Purple means that you're in an interest level. You're probably in that hand raiser category that you were talking about earlier. And then green means I've done it. So this is a snapshot of one ministry that had been doing conversations through the mail for 6 years. And you can see here 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and then this is 2023. Look at row 15 here. Here's an example of somebody who was orange. Again, that was what I called an awareness level example. Now, no color. They didn't even say enough in their response to qualify them to even be awareness level. They were below that. So 2 years in that awareness level. Then they were silent for a year, came back and were still orange, didn't even go through purple. And now here, after responding to some conversations, 4 out of 5 years, in the 5th and the 6th year, they came and said, you're in my will. And those are the examples, I think, that, again, if we're talking about this idea, how do we communicate value? We know we've got to start doing it long before the gift is realized, because it takes a long time to get there. This donor ultimately has value to the organization, but in 2018 all the way through 2022, there was nothing to show for it. So that, now, just some anecdotes along the way that I think that we've seen in the work that we do, and how these ministries have been able to connect with donors. A story that I like to tell: somebody came in to, again, a group we serve, for a tour in 2014. So that's 10 years ago. And then they left their home to the ministry, which was just now, there wasn't a lot that happened in the interim in that one, but it's an example of serving donors over a period of time until that gift comes to maturity. Here's another anecdote. Again, a true story, same ministry. About 2014, the donor requested some content That was being offered by the ministry. It was inspirational content. It was donor focused. It was designed to add value, something along the lines of how you can become the person that God created you to be. But that content also talked about legacy. And then the donor rep followed up by phone to start a relationship. The donor was kept engaged in ministry through event invitations, through surveys, and it was 5 years later. This is a different donor than the one I was showing you on that color chart. But 5 years later, the ministry received a notification of a gift in the will. So those are the kind of stories that I like to see, but I like to share. But I think what it highlights is one that it's that serving over selling, that legacy gifts are motivated by depth of connection, but they're triggered by life events. And so that takes time. All right. I want to shift here. I think we're at, 15 minutes to the hour, and we've got a few questions that have come in. Before we do that, Janie, did we want to talk about, I think we have a poll. If folks want to learn more, they can do that at this time. So yeah, you have an opportunity right now if you'd like to learn more about what you heard today. If there was a question that you'd like to talk to either someone from Money for Ministry or Giving Docs about, you can click that poll, and we look forward to connecting with you. A few questions that have come in the Q&A. Somebody asked, what percentage of people who should have a will do have a will? I'm just going to go off what I've seen. Usually we say 70% of adults do not have an up-to-date will. I suppose, I don't know, Brantley, depends who you talk to. They might say 65 or 75, but
yeah, well, that's the problem with the numbers that say, 45% of people have a will or whatever. It's that the ones that are up to date. So when we looked at it, of the people that had them, it's a huge number were out of date. And the crazy thing is, as an adult, on the average, you experience a life change every 18 months, which would or could necessitate a change to your estate plan. And people just aren't updating them that often. We just know that that's not happening. So that's why the numbers are really hard to pin down on exactly who has one that's what they need it to be.
Another question came in, and this probably reflects something I said earlier. How do you frame the conversation of discussing the fact that money left to heirs is typically gone in 18 months without them taking offense that you're saying their heirs are going to be irresponsible with the money they leave them? That probably takes that comment further than I intended it. I don't think it was meant to be a communication with the family, but more of a way to encourage us or embolden us to have these conversations. I don't know. Would you agree, Brantley, or anything you would?
Yeah, I wouldn't approach someone with that. That's more kind of something to know. But it is interesting if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to leave a gift, and I'm not sure about my kids," right? And you can say, "Well, actually, there's a good chance, if you don't trust them already, that we know that on the average this money is spent poorly, and maybe use it like that." But no, I wouldn't lead with that.
How do you ask, Wayne says, how do you ask current recurring donors to consider estate planning? I could take that one if you'd like, or do you have a thought on it?
Go ahead.
I think these are, when you say recurring donor, I'm just going to say any loyal, faithful donor. Anybody who's been, recurring donors are a good place to start. If the question is, who should I start talking to? And you want to talk to current recurring donors, I say you're definitely in the right place, because those are your best prospects. Now, the trouble of me answering this question is I don't necessarily know the relationship that you have with these current recurring donors to begin with, but I have two kind of ideas that I hold kind of loosely when I think about these conversations. One is person, passion, preference. So if you think about, just remember those three terms, PPP, person, passion, preference. And the second is vision, values, and valuables. So person, passion, preference works like this. How'd you first connect with our organization, our ministry? What inspired you to get involved? And what are you most passionate about? Now, this assumes that you don't have much of a relationship with them already, but you're really trying to hear the donor's person, passion, and then how do you prefer to be involved with us? Is it through current giving? Is it through volunteering? Is it through being a prayer partner? Or is it, well, then there's a great opportunity to pivot and say, you know, there's a lot of people like you who've been involved for many years who have chosen to include us as a beneficiary of their will. Is that something you would consider? And I like that consider question as a way to get people to consider. You're just frankly asking them to consider. So vision, values, valuables, it's kind of similar to that. It's just a little bit different approach. Again, this might assume you have a bit of a relationship with a donor already, but hey, Fred and Suzanne, it's been great to get to know you over these many months or years. How do you want to be remembered? What values and stories do you want to pass on and share with future generations? And then you might say, you know, are there any organizations or people that embody those values? And would you ever consider including those ministries in your will? Overly simplified because it's kind of out of context, but I think those are some great strategies to help folks start to think vision, values, and valuables, person, passion, and preference.
And I saw we got a question from Elena here. How often should people how long should you update your estate documents? I think was the question she was trying to get at. And the answer is, unfortunately, just saying, you know, every 2 years, there's not like a one size fits all for this. So essentially, it's when there's a life change that essentially people need having a child, getting a divorce, or just one of many examples, but it might have something to do with more distant family members. It might have something to do with the acquisition of real estate or a change in your retirement plans that might, you know, cause this you need to look and decide if you need to make a change there. So what we really want to do is kind of educate or get people thinking about that when they have life changes. So a lot of people create their first will when they have their first child, right? Because that they need to create a guardianship, and that is a motivator. But they might not update it when they have their second, and they often don't update it when they get divorced. And so it's just kind of reinforcing to people like, hey, when you have significant life changes, this is really a time to review your estate plan too. I get that, you know, you had a divorce and it's not fun, but there's some things that probably need to change here. And, you know, that kind of stuff, getting people to really think about all life changes as a potential to update their estate plan and getting more comfortable with estate planning and leading them towards thinking about it as giving rather than death planning is kind of how we've approached that.
Love it. Yeah, that's that's yeah. I was thinking about the example someone gave me recently that when your will is read and you have 3 children, but only 2 of them are named in the will, then the third child is known as a child to be named later or unborn. You know, I'm sure they can laugh if they're healthy, they can laugh about it, but better to have them named in the will for family harmony. Here's a question that came in. Oh, do you want to say something, Brantley?
No, I think go ahead. Read Luke's question is what you're going to do.
Yeah, what's a healthy percentage of total gifts in a given year that are estate gifts? I realize this would change depending on the organization's size and makeup, but is there a baseline that gives you a sense of where you are?
Yeah, so I mean, every organization is going to look different, and it's not the total percentage of total gifts, but the percentage of the money that comes from these gifts. I think we can really track better than percentage of total gifts. So, you know, the recent Giving USA report, forgive me if you get the numbers, but this has remained relatively steady. The plan giving accounts for roughly 10% of overall giving. And plan giving is actually on the rise, and annual giving has slowly gotten less and less, and plan giving has gotten consistently more, but over the past few years, it's kind of held steady there at 10% of overall nonprofit giving. Unfortunately, that skews heavier to larger organizations and higher ed because some of the largest gifts are coming from some of the wealthiest people. And we have people like Mackenzie Bezos, who's doing a really good job of spreading it around. And but then we know that a lot of those planned gifts are large gifts to endowments and such. So I think healthy for a smaller org is probably anywhere between 5 and 10%.
And I would say too, if it's zero right now, I mean, it's not something to be discouraged about. We say we're planting trees today under whose shade we probably won't sit, but if you don't start today, there won't be anything. Or how does it go? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time to plant a tree is today. So if and it's interesting. You're talking about it on the back side in terms of gifts coming in. We look at it on the front side as well. A healthy percentage. Now it depends on the kind of ministry or organization you are. If you're a rescue mission, between 0.7 and 1% of reported. In other words, people say who they give you their name. That could mean there's another 3 to 4% that is unreported. Now I'm not talking about gifts in the door. I'm talking about notifications, people who are living, who said you're in their will. If you're a ministry sending organization, you send people overseas to do community development, it can be a little bit higher than that. Again, depends on what the kind of ministry you are. A small private Christian school, too, can be around 5 or 6%, even higher. Colleges and universities, some of them are 7 or 8%, the ones we work with, of reported gifts. So if you're not there yet, it's okay, but now's the time to get started. All right. Luke had a follow-up question. Does it have any positive neutral impact on giving? You want to take that one, Brantley? Otherwise, I have a thought.
Oh, go ahead. You got it.
Yeah. Yeah, the answer typically is it has a boost on giving. So, and this is Russell James material who we've talked about already. People don't, it's not like you cannibalize annual fund giving. If anything, you boost it. If I am your heir, if I ministry am your heir, now I'm even more invested in the work that you're doing. I want to see you thrive today and tomorrow.
That's right.
Somebody, there was a question that I saw earlier too. Somebody asked, we just got quick time for one more. How are you different than free will? Do you want to take a shot at that, Brantley?
Yeah, generally, I think probably the biggest difference is we're not available to the general public. So you do not go to givingdocs.com to get your free estate plan. We are only available as a member donor congregant benefit for the partners that we work with. So just don't have a consumer facing angle to our platform.
All right. Well, it's so good to have this conversation with you today, Brantley. It was fun for me. I trust it was fun for you as well. I love hearing about the behavioral science, and that's especially interesting to me because I think so much of what we do is motivated by things we haven't even thought about. Glad to have you with us. 2 opportunities as we close out the webinar today. There will be a survey after we hang up, and would love to get your feedback. You can also tell us what topics you'd like to hear more about in the future. And then also, we have a webinar coming up October 31 with Brad Leyland from the Focus Group. We're going to be talking about capital campaigns and planned giving. So if you're in a capital campaign right now, or you're thinking about a capital campaign, and maybe you're wondering, what does planned giving have to do with a capital campaign? Or maybe you hadn't thought about that. But let me hint, you should really be thinking about that. This would be a great time to learn more. So, hey, again, thanks for being with us. Money for Ministry. Our heart is to see the church thrive and flourish in all its forms. We want to help ministries like yours deepen relationships so that people can be healed, lives can be transformed by the power of the good news that Jesus has come and that he's risen and that he's coming again to make all things new. So it's grateful to be with you on this journey. I think that making all things new, I love it when the science and the faith reinforce each other. I think that's more true than we tend to give it credit for. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So grateful to be with you on this journey, celebrating and acting in this great renewing work. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.